number 10, fake it till you make it. Disney is often referred to as the happiest place on earth. A pretty big claim, but in their efforts to keep the park so positive, they have a few tricks up their sleeves. If you've been to Disney and skipped out on a ride due to the long wait time listed, you may want to reconsider next time. Disney uses the trick of overestimating wait time so you'll think you waited less than you were supposed to. This keeps guests in line happier for longer. Another thing that may seem totally normal are the American flags located all over the park. The flags located within Disney are often missing one of the stars or stripes. Why would they do this? Well, by omitting something from the original flag, it means they don't have to follow standard American flag regulations like flying them at half-mast at certain times. I mean, that's pretty smart. It's never a happy thing when a flag is at half-mast, so it's fitting they would try to avoid having to do that. When they say Disney is very detail-oriented, they aren't kidding. The last thing I'll mention that may seem real but is really just the park making the rides seem crazier than they are is their use of dramatic effects. If you walk past the Twilight Zone or Tower of Terror, you'll hear a lot of screaming. Some of those screams are real, but some are apparently fake and being played through the speakers to entice more guests to go in. Also, the boats at Splash Mountain don't actually cause such a big splash. There are cannons at the end of the drop that make the huge splashes of water. Real or fake, if it makes the day more fun, I'll take it. Number 9, underground tunnels. The rumors are true. There is an entire tunnel system under the park. By the time you reach the entrance of the Magic Kingdom, you probably won't even notice that you've been walking up a slight incline ever since getting off the monorail or ferry. By the time you reach the iconic castle, you'll have already reached the 3rd floor level. Rumor has it the reason they created the underground tunnel system is because of Walt Disney himself. Walt was wandering through Tomorrowland in Disneyland as a staff member dressed as a cowboy walked by him on his way to his position at Frontierland. One look told Disney that a cowboy dressed in a checkered shirt, bandana, and cowboy boots twirling a 6-shooter looked totally out of place in Tomorrowland. Walt didn't want anything to distract visitors from their magical experience, like an old cowboy walking through the future, so when it came time for Disney World in Florida, they planned for the underground world. Due to Florida's high water table, digging out a basement was out of the question, so Disney improvised by building the tunnels at ground level and creating the world right on top. A former employee said, "Under the Magic Kingdom there are tons of underground tunnels. I could pop up almost anywhere in the park I wanted. Epcot has a tunnel underneath as well." Say what you will about Walt, but he really was dedicated to keeping the illusion alive. Number 8, no breaking character. I think we all know by now that Disney really wants to keep the illusion alive at all times. Having said that, have you ever thought about how the characters who have to wear suits all day don't get super hot? Well, the short answer is they do, but it doesn't matter. Staff members who have to wear large costumes, which I would imagine get pretty stuffy, have to simply ignore the heat and get on with it no matter what. One Reddit user shared a story and said, "A scuba instructor I had once told me that he applied for the job as Water Goofy on a Disney cruise. Water Goofy is simply Goofy who hangs out by the pool. But before he could accept the job, the scuba instructor had to agree that in the event he started drowning, he had to be carried away before lifeguards remove his costume. You know, so they don't upset the children. CPR would not be performed on scene." I mean, I understand no breaking character, but come on. I really think that in this situation, a few upset children would be worth saving the person's life. But hey, Disney doesn't mess around. The rule goes for employees at parks as well. If you're too hot or dying, do it somewhere else. Luckily, each character is always accompanied by a supervisor that helps them know where they need to go and when. So if things were really getting serious, the supervisor is there to help out. At number 7, too many gators. Walt Disney World is located in Orlando, Florida. One thing Florida is known for is their alligators. While Disney does pull out all the stops in order to keep the park magical, they have had their fair share of run-ins with gators. In 2016, a 2-year-old boy passed away at the Seven Seas Lagoon due to an alligator. Since then, more than 200 alligators have been removed from the parks. The company has worked with trappers contracted through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to remove the gators. Most of the pests taken from Disney are euthanized and sold for their hide and meat. Some are also transferred to alligator farms, animal exhibits, and zoos. After the incident in 2016, Disney installed a wall and put up reptile warning signs along waterways throughout the resort. It would definitely take you out of the magic of Disney if you spot a large gator in the water, but they now have a trapper on hand and take care of any sightings. It is Florida, so there really isn't much more the park can do except keep an eye and be proactive. To be considered a nuisance within the statewide nuisance alligator program, an alligator must be at least 4 feet long and pose a threat to people, pets, and/or property. Not long ago, guests spotted a live alligator at Magic Kingdom. Disney can train their performers and dress them to the nines and make all the illusions as real as can be, but the only thing they struggle with is those gators. Unfortunately, even if you are at Disney World, you're still in Florida. Number 6. Strict appearance rules. Dressing as a Disney princess sounds like a pretty good gig, and I think many who have had the job would say that it is. But they may also tell you it's a job that comes with a whole lot of pressure. Working as a Disney princess takes a whole lot more than just throwing on the dress and waving to the guests. All of the performers have to undergo several rounds of auditions, with staff usually having to play multiple characters in the park depending on staffing. When auditioning, everything is being considered: your height, weight, voice, etc. In order for the character to get their voices just right, the performers will watch Disney movies of their characters and repeat the lines back. For most girls, the character's voice is higher than their real voice, so high that some women will go on vocal rest due to strained vocal cords. One former employee shared that despite participating in Disney's college program, she was never able to play a face character because she was too ethnic looking, despite being Italian. Disney favors light hair and skin people so they can play multiple characters. Another employee shares that many of her colleagues have been disapproved of working as face characters because they've either aged or gained weight. It's not a good job for your self-esteem, it sounds like. Apparently, they bring you in once a month, put you in the costume, and reevaluate you. If you're disapproved due to weight gain, you wouldn't be fired, simply switch to a more covered up character. This has led to employees feeling body shamed or that they need to take unhealthy measures to stay thin. Basically, Disney doesn't play around with continuity. The Cinderella you see in the morning will be the same you see in the afternoon, regardless if it's the same actor or not. At number 5. Painful costumes. Becoming a character from such loved Disney movies and meeting kids that think you're the real deal would definitely be fun. But I think the amount of fun you have as a staff member really depends on which character you are. Former character employees told Mental Floss that they've been basically beaten up by visitors and little kids, but the real wear and tear comes from the fur costumes. Apparently every character employee starts out as a fur character, and these costumes can weigh as much as 47 pounds. In 2005, the last year this data was available, the heavy suits were blamed for 282 injuries. One former fur character shared that while in costume she was punched, put in a chokehold, and had her shoulder partly dislocated and bruised 3 fingers. This performer eventually went to physical therapy for her shoulder and needed knee surgery thanks to the weight of the costume. That year, character performers across the 4 parks that made up Disney World reported 773 injuries total. 49 of those cited the heavy costume heads as the case of injury. Another performer once had to go on temporary disability leave after a guest picked her up and shook her while she was playing Minnie Mouse, resulting in whiplash from the weight of the mouse head. Of the 773 injuries, 107 were the result of some sort of aggressive behavior, whether intentional or not, from guests. I guess some Disney visitors get a little too into the fantasy and forget there are people inside working those suits. Luckily, they have rules in place of how long a performer can be in costume at a time before needing a break, which is usually no longer than 45 minutes. At number 4. Poorly treated princesses. The princesses in the park are one of the most magical parts of visiting Disney. Decked out with the dress, hair, and accessories, tons of kids and adults are able to make their dreams of meeting their favorite Disney princesses in real life come true. Unfortunately, like with most nice things, there's always someone right there ready to ruin it. Many employees, usually the women characters, say they've experienced inappropriate sexual behavior from park visitors. I know there are unfortunately few jobs that women don't experience this behavior, but the difference with Disney is they can't break character. Reddit user Little Bones wrote, "I was a Tinkerbell performer for Walt Disney World about 3 years ago, and I can't count how many times people would ask me what's under my dress or tried to touch me. I would always shame them to my photo pass attendant, their families, and the people in line by loudly exclaiming, 'You want to know what's under my dress? Well, there's pixie dust, of course,' or 'This man's a pirate, he's trying to reach the pixie dust that I keep under my dress,' and they'd walk away in shame like the creepy a-holes they are. It's pretty scary that they can't do much about the harassment, but it's even more scary that there are people at a place full of children sexualizing and literally touching a fictional character made for kids. It may be where dreams come true, but even Disney can't weed out all the creeps at the door." Number 3. Shared undies. Alright, this one is seriously my least favorite thing I learned about Disney when making this video. Aside from the fabulous park, action-packed rides, and all the snacks your Disney heart could want, one of the best part about the park is the opportunity to meet your favorite characters in person. Disney cast members go above and beyond to ensure guests visiting the park are experiencing the magic. Well, back in the day, according to reports, Disneyland used to force cast members to share underwear as a part of the costume for work. Ew. The report stated that cast members inside the costumes had to wear regulation company-issued underwear. If you were to wear your own, you would create a visible line that the guests could see. So instead of just giving the cast members their own pack of the proper undies to take home at the end of each shift, employees had to hand in their underwear for washing. This was the way for a while, but the washing of the underwear was so bad they had to stop using the system in 2001. The report said when they started receiving dirty and smelly underwear at the start of their shifts and contracting nasty conditions like pubic lice and scabies, people started to suspect that the underwear garments weren't actually being washed very well. You think? Like, I actually want to gag. Imagine getting ready for work and putting on someone else's dirty undies. And they aren't just dirty undies. They were worn for an entire shift in a heavy costume in the heat, dirty. Disney finally declared that while they still had to wear the uniform underwear, cast members could wash them at home. Number 2. Real bones. One thing I know for certain about Disney is they try super hard to make everything look as real as possible. A place that was no exception was the Pirates of the Caribbean ride located in Adventureland. The park was so committed to making things visually appealing that even fake bones used for the skeletons on the ride were not good enough. That's right, when the Pirates of the Caribbean ride opened at Disneyland in 1967, each and every skeleton on the attraction was made of actual human bones. The ride opened just months after Walt Disney's passing and was the last he personally oversaw. One thing, however, the Imagineers couldn't recreate was skeletons. The technology of the time wasn't sophisticated enough to make skeletons that the company felt met their standard of realism. So as a solution, they decided not to fake it and get the real deal. They went right to UCLA where they were able to get real human skeletons for the ride. Probably not what the people who donated their remains to UCLA's medical center imagined their bones would be used for, but hey, I guess chilling at Disney in the afterlife wouldn't be too bad. If being around real human remains gives you the creeps, don't worry because they didn't last forever. Eventually, as fake skeletons and technology improved, a new generation of Imagineers were able to replace the real ones. After being replaced, the real remains were later returned to their countries of origin and given a proper burial. Today, Disneyland says there are no longer any human remains on the ride. That being said, some people are still unconvinced. Jason Petros of Ears Up Disney podcast has a blog post detailing where he believes there are 4 remaining instances of, well, remains. I can't see why they wouldn't remove all the old bones, but hey, you never know, Disney does love its Easter eggs. And at number 1, spreading ashes at Haunted Mansion. The Haunted Mansion is one of Disney's most famous attractions, located in Liberty Square at Magic Kingdom Park. While it is called the Haunted Mansion, it's not actually haunted, and they keep the scare factor pretty mild. That being said, the mansion does hold a pretty haunted secret. Apparently, a lot of people like to scatter the ashes of their loved ones at the park, but more specifically inside the Haunted Mansion. I mean, if you're gonna spread ashes at Disney, the Haunted Mansion does seem like a pretty fitting place. It sounds a bit wild, but in 2018 a report by Wall Street Journal confirmed this fact and even stated that custodians at the park use code words to tackle said problem. HEPA cleanup is used, named after the special vacuum filter needed to suck up very fine particles like ashes and their residue. A story about the Haunted Mansion ride states that people believe that by scattering the ashes on the ride, they join the ghosts and live in the theme park forever. Considering Disney is referred to as the happiest place on earth, I understand why some people would have their wish to be scattered there. However, every time someone sneaks ashes into the park, whether it be in medicine bottles, purses, or makeup compacts, without proper permission, it violates the health and safety code and they have to shut down the park because of it. One Disney custodian told the Wall Street Journal, "The Haunted Mansion probably has so much human ashes in it that it's not even funny." Yikes. The Haunted Mansion may not have been haunted when it first opened, but at this point, it just might be.
Starting off this countdown, we have the lifeguards. So I came across this TikTok and apparently he used to be a lifeguard at Disney. That is absolutely horrifying if he's telling the truth. It must be super stressful being a lifeguard at Disney. Like, their water parks and wave pools are always packed. It's so sad if that has actually happened. In our 9th spot, we have the deaths. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up. You know the drill because it really helps us out. Also, if you haven't already, go check out the other parts of the series. So Disney is very, very protective of its image. It wants to maintain that it's a safe and family-friendly place. So they claim that no one has ever died at their park, which is clearly false. Tons of accidents have happened at Disney World and Disneyland. Both visitors and workers have lost their lives at Disney. But their claim is 100% true. Now, you're probably thinking, how is this possible? So it turns out what Disney does is when someone does die at the park, employees have to remove the body from the property before pronouncing them dead. That means no one technically died at the park, only outside of the park's gates. They do this all so that families feel safe coming there, because if no one dies there, then clearly it's super safe. But still, this is pretty sketchy if you ask me. In our 8th spot, we have the injuries. Now, if you work for Disney as one of the characters and you get injured on the job, well, guess what? You can't receive medical assistance until you're out of the public's eye. This is just another crazy rule that Disney has. You have to stay in character no matter what. They all do this to preserve the illusion of Disney and magic. I mean, how horrifying would it be if all of a sudden Mickey rips off his head and starts like gushing blood in front of kids? Now, one worker was told before accepting a job as Water Goofy on a Disney cruise, he had to agree that if for some reason he started drowning, he had to be carried away before lifeguards could remove his costume and perform CPR. So he could literally be dying in the costume and need medical attention right away, but Disney won't allow that. Moving on to number 7, we have the repairs. Ever notice how Disney is pretty much always in great condition? I mean, some of the rides are super old, but they don't look it. Well, according to a former Disney employee, every night workers go around the park touching up any and everything. During the day, the workers note if there's any graffiti anywhere in the park or if there's paint chipping anywhere. They write it down and let the night shift workers know, and then they go around fixing it all. I mean, I just took in that I've never seen graffiti at Disney, and that's exactly why. But also, it's a very tedious job. They have to go around the full park and get it all done before the park reopens in the morning. Moving on to number 6, we have the fire accident. So this next story comes from a Disney employee that worked as an outdoor vendor. One night while watching a fireworks show, Tinkerbell got stuck on the wire above the castle since she had been hoisted up because she was flying in the air. But her wire was stuck, and she almost burned to death up there. There was a whole Indiana Jones portion of the show, and in it they had large fireballs. Well, they couldn't stop the show to get Tinkerbell down, so they kind of just left her there and turned off her spotlight so no one could see what was going on, and then they prayed for the best. But like I said before, it's a risk you take while working for Disney. You know, you could be dying and they're not gonna save your life if it interferes with their show. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the cursed ride. Believe it or not, but there is a ride at Disney that all workers believe is cursed. This is the Matterhorn. First off, this ride is responsible for the most fatal and non-fatal incidents. In 1964, a teen on the ride stood up in the bobsled and then died after being thrown out from the ride. Then another time, the ride caught on fire, injuring a family in their sled. And another visitor died after she was launched out of her seat and then hit by another bobsled. More on this later. You think they would have fixed this ride after the first couple of deaths, but no, they blame it on a curse instead. They should just kind of look into the safety of that ride, because I don't know if it's that safe. In our 4th spot, we have the Death on Space Mountain. Okay, this one is pretty dark. So in 1979, a woman died on the Space Mountain ride. She was only 31 at the time. So basically, after the ride was done, this woman didn't feel well at all, but she couldn't get out of her seat by herself. The ride operators were trying to get her out of her seat, but the other workers weren't notified, so they ended up sending her on the ride again. This time, when the ride was done, she was completely unconscious. It literally put her in a coma. She passed away a week later. Now, technically, this wasn't Disney's fault. I mean, part of it was. They had a lawsuit filed against them, but it was dismissed because apparently while on the ride, a tumor dislodged from her heart and then traveled to her brain. Yeah, I know, that's super scary. In our 3rd spot, we have the ghost of Walt Disney. So for those of you who don't know, Disney had a secret apartment. It was located just above the firehouse on Main Street, USA. This apartment was built so that he could watch the guests enjoy his creation without being overwhelmed by the crowds. Now, his apartment was so secretive that him and his family and special guests were the only ones allowed in there. In fact, photographers were rarely allowed inside. As a result, there are hardly any photos of Mr. Disney and his family in this place. Well, after the passing of Walt Disney in 1966, cast members decide to place a small lamp at the window. They keep the light on to symbolize that Disney's spirit is still alive at Disneyland. And this may be indeed true, because it's said that his ghost still haunts his apartment. A number of employees have seen Disney while cleaning the apartment. Apparently one worker was in there and then the lights started flickering on and off. Another worker said she heard a voice say, "Don't forget, I am still here." And that's when she probably quit, because that's terrifying. In our second spot, we have Dolly's Dip. So in 1984, Regina, otherwise known as Dolly Young, was riding on the Matterhorn when her seatbelt came undone. She was then thrown from the ride and hit and killed by another bobsled. Now, there's still much debate as to how her seatbelt came undone. Some say that she unbuckled it to help her children who were in another car. Others think that the seatbelt just wasn't buckled properly in the first place. Either way, this accident was super tragic. But that's not all. Now Disney employees claim that Dolly's spirit haunts the ride. The area in which she died is now called Dolly's Dip, and employees hate going there by themselves. Those that do have claimed to feel like someone is watching them. Others say that the lights in Dolly's Dip never work properly anymore. Now everyone kind of just avoids that area at all costs. And in our number one spot, we have the tragic accident. So this story was shared on Reddit by a man who once worked at Disney as a VIP tour guide. So he was in the city hall when two women came in with two little girls. One of the girls was in a wheelchair, the other girl looked very depressed. Both of them had cuts and bruises all over them. The two women with them were nurses from the hospital that the girls had just been to. They were there to ask for a refund for the girls' tickets. Now, here's where the story gets very sad. So apparently the girls had been with their mom and dad at Epcot, but on their way home they got in a really bad car accident. They both lost their parents in the crash. So the nurses had come to try and get a refund for the tickets so that the girls could get money to try and go home. Now, how dark is that? That's extremely sad.
Starting off this countdown, we have the terrible situation. So according to this Disney employee, this incident took place on the 4th of July in 1995. On that day, there was a power glitch and all of the rides shut down at the same time. So all of them had to be evacuated, but that led to a pileup at the park. Everyone started panicking and trying to get out, especially this one guest who pulled out something sharp from their bag and started guests so that they could get out of the park. Thankfully, I don't think anyone died that day, but still, what a traumatic thing that they had to go through. In our ninth spot, we have the injuries. One Disney employee shared on Reddit how rough it truly is to be a Disney mascot character. I mean, not only do they have to wear those costumes out in the blazing heat, they also have to deal with whiny and bratty children and parents. And apparently, a lot of the time, they get injured. One time, a family attacked Pluto and pushed the character into the fountain. The employee suffered from a broken arm. In another instance, a woman playing Mickey Mouse suffered a bad neck injury after a guest kept patting her on the head. This caused the head to fall down and strain her neck. And the costumes themselves weigh 47 pounds. They're blamed for at least 282 injuries. So maybe just be gentle with them. But before I go any further, if you guys are liking this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Come on, you know the drill, because it really helps us out. In our 8th spot, we have the working conditions. It's no shock that landing a job at Disney is very, very hard. Every year they receive thousands upon thousands of applications. But here's the thing, if you do land a job at Disney, you have to be very, very careful because you can easily be fired. Here's a list of ways you could get fired. For starters, you could get fired for coming to work looking unacceptable. Workers always have to have their facial hair neat and trimmed. Their nails always have to be trimmed back, and they can't have any visible piercings. They are super strict about this all. You can also get fired if you post something bad on social media about the company, if you're a face actor and you gain weight, or if you talk while in your costume. I mean, the last one I get, I don't want to be hugging Winnie the Pooh and then hear some old man talking. Anyways, this one employee said that he was fired from Disney after being caught eating a piece of popcorn popcorn that fell on their shirt. That's insane. I would be fired instantly if that's the case, because I make a mess while I'm eating and then I just always eat the crumbs off my shirt. Sorry, not sorry. It's just scary how controlling Disney is over their employees. Moving on to number 7, we have the Disney point. Here's another ridiculous thing that Disney employees must do. No matter what, they always have to point with their index finger and middle finger. They can't point with just one finger because that's thought to be rude. So whenever they're showing people directions or something, they always have to point with 2 fingers. In fact, you could be fired if you're caught pointing with 1 finger. Coming in at number 6, we have the bullying. Now, working at Disney is often thought of as a dream job. There are so many characters that aspire to be a character at Disney. I hate to break it to you, but apparently the work environment is fairly toxic. According to multiple employees, there's a lot of bullying that takes place behind the scenes, especially when it comes to the character actors. So there is a sense of hierarchy there. The girls that play the recent popular Disney princesses like Anna and Elsa are thought of as top tier. They're at the top of this Disney social pyramid. Then we have the actors that play the older characters like Snow White, Mary Poppins, Gaston, Peter Pan, you get it. And at the bottom of the pyramid are the mascot characters. Apparently the mascot characters are treated so poorly by other cast members. So yeah, I don't know if I would ever want to work there. Like, I like teamwork and cooperation, not rivalry. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the water. So if you've been to Disney, then you know some rides are surrounded by water. According to employees, that water, although it may not look like that, is extremely polluted and filthy. From people throwing up in there, to trash, to animal poop, it's got it all. And I don't know how often it gets clean. If it looks clean to them, then it's good enough. So maybe think twice before getting on a ride that sprays you with water. In our 4th spot, we have the costumes. So in my last video, I talked about how some of the bigger and elaborate mascot costumes can't really get washed. So instead, they just spray it with disinfectant. Well, here's a fact that will gross you out even more. Back in the day, cast members at Walt Disney had to obviously share costumes, but they also had to share undergarments. Until 2001, each costume had their own Disney-sanctioned undergarments that they would have to share with each other. So gross. Because of that, a lot of workers were passing around STIs and STDs and stuff. So that's when they stopped sharing underwear. Like, that is highly unsanitary, and I'm glad that's not a thing anymore. Moving on at number 3, we have the alligator problem. So once upon a time, Disney had a really bad alligator problem. They still kind of do. But obviously, they didn't want park guests to worry about this, so they kept downplaying this problem. From 2006 to 2015, 220 alligators had to be removed from Disney World. Then from 2015 to 2016, there was a massive increase of gators at the park. Since Disney is connected to waterways that intersect with lakes and rivers, alligators have an easier access to Disney than they admitted. That's when Disney was exposed for downplaying the seriousness of their alligator problem. Now, they are taking it seriously and have increased their safety measures. Coming in at number 2, we have the dead body. So here's a fun fact. There is a dead body at Disneyland. Well, kind of. Let me explain. So according to employees, back in the day when the Pirates of the Caribbean ride was being built, they decided to use real human bones. Why? Because they thought that the fake bones looked too thick. Didn't look real enough, so they brought in real ones. Apparently, they got these bones from UCLA Medical School. The real bones were used for a while, then eventually they were swapped out for fake ones. But the skull and crossbones featured in the ride behind a skeleton lounging in bed are still real. And in our number 1 spot, we have the cursed ride. Now, according to multiple different employees, the Haunted Mansion ride is actually cursed. So it all started back in the day when a visitor died on the ride. At one point, he stood up to try and reach a part of the attraction, but ended up falling off the ride and plummeted to his death. Other eerie things have happened there that have led them to believe the ride is cursed. Like how in Disneyland Paris, a worker was found dead at their Phantom Manor ride, which is basically like the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney World. His body was found 2 days later after his death. His cause of death was apparently electrocution. Still, they think this is all because of the Haunted Mansion ride curse. To make matters worse, the ride uses an authentic 14th century spell book containing real spells. So yeah, maybe this curse has something to do with that.
Starting off this countdown, we have the secret tunnel system. I know I've talked about this before, but Walt Disney created a whole underground tunnel system for the characters to have a break, and it's for them to secretly get around the park without walking everywhere in costume. This way, this all preserves the magical feel of Disney. But some employees shared what really goes on down there. First off, they said that the tunnel system is fairly confusing, and on a number of occasions, people have gotten lost down there. One employee said that they had just got a job playing a Disney mascot character and went down into the tunnels and had no clue where to go. He went to ask other employees for help, but since he was new, they kind of just brushed him off. Another employee revealed that some of the cast members like to get it on during their breaks down in the tunnel system. So while you're up above having fun, they're down below having fun. Just in a different way, if you understand what I'm getting at. Coming in at number 9, we have the waiting lines. But before I go any further, if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. I think the one flaw about Disney are its lines. Seriously, nobody's got time for that. But a couple of years ago, a huge scandal broke out involving Disney and their waiting lines. Basically, rich families were paying tour guides that have access to these special passes for the disabled. Basically, with this pass, you get brought right to the top of the line because Disney wants guests with disabilities to have a great time. But wealthy, able people were abusing this, which is absolutely sickening. Can't believe people were actually doing this just to scam the system. Moving on at number 8, we have the overnighter. For this next point, let's move back along to Disney's tunnel system. So remember I talked about how new employees often get lost down in the tunnels? Well, there's this creepy urban legend about this happening to a new employee. So he finished his shift and went down to the tunnels to change. As he was making his way out, the lights in the tunnel shut off, and he was in the complete darkness. Now, he had trouble already finding the exit with the lights on. Now with the lights off, it was even more difficult. He ended up wandering around the tunnel system for hours before collapsing from exhaustion. He ended up staying there overnight. His coworkers found him in the morning. He was freezing cold and super scared. So now this story is kind of used to scare new employees. In our 7th spot, we have the suspicious death. So in 2012, a man's body was found near the Mickey and Friends parking structure at Disneyland. Police just assumed the man took his own life, but no witnesses ever reported seeing this man jump. Now what's weird is that I tried to search more into this case, but I couldn't find anything. We don't know what truly happened to this man and how he passed away, which is a little suspicious to me. In our 6th spot, we have Yes Man. So this story was shared by a former Disney employee that worked near the Indiana Jones ride. So his job was to dress up as an adventurer and just stand around. But he said he was often attacked by kids, and Disney told him that he just kind of had to take it. So these kids would often be super psyched to go on this ride, and so they were in costume and had plastic weapons. He said on a number of occasions, kids would come up to him and literally whip him with their weapons. Or he would get asked to duel, and he always had to say yes. So kids would just be jabbing him with their plastic swords. Yeah, that's not a job I would like. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Winnie the Pooh gets sued. I thought that was so clever. Like, I was typing that and I came up with that and I'm like, pat on the back. Good job, Lindsay. Anyway, in 1978, a guest at the park sued Disney and a cast member, claiming that the cast member playing Winnie the Pooh slapped their daughter. In 1981, their case was brought to court, and the cast member showed up in the Winnie the Pooh costume. He argued that their daughter was tugging on his costume, he turned around and accidentally knocked her over. And then in court, he proceeded to show the jury his costume's arms, saying it's not even physically possible for him to do that in the first place, you know, with his little limited movement. In the end, Disney ended up winning, but still, what a wild day at court. And I love how he showed up in costume. Coming in at number 4, we have the Deadly Ride. On June 26, 2007, a female guest passed away on the Rock and Roller Coaster avec Aerosmith ride at Disneyland Paris. After the ride was done, people noticed her unconscious. The paramedics arrived, but failed to revive her. sadly, she passed away. Now, in articles it said that the ride wasn't going to reopen until they found out how and why she passed. But there's no follow-up articles outlining what went wrong on the ride. And it's not like she was 80 years old and had health conditions. No, she was fairly young. I just wish Disney let us know what happened, because the ride has been up and running ever since, but no official statement was ever released. In our third spot, we have Disney's jail. Did you know that Disney has its own specific jail for criminals? Yeah, if you're caught breaking any of Disney's rules, you'll be escorted to Disney jail. Employees describe it as an underground room with bars on the windows. There's no bright colors or Mickeys decorating the area. Now, what causes you to be sent to Disney jail? Well, if you get too rowdy or too intoxicated at the park, if you smoke certain substances at the park, or if you're caught shoplifting. You get the picture. Disney is actually very strict when it comes to this. People caught shoplifting aren't even given a warning sometimes. Instead, they're just sent straight to their jail. From there, you can be fined, kicked out of the park, banned from ever coming back to the park, or all of the above. In our second spot, we have Blake Lively's arrest. Believe it or not, but actress Blake Lively was once sent to Disney jail. Yeah, so basically her and her brother both snuck into Disneyland's park. What they did is put hairspray on the stamps of somebody that came out of the park and then put their hands together, and that transferred the stamp. Then they got to go in the park for free. Except Blake and her brother were caught by an undercover Disney cop and sent to Disney jail. I'm telling you, Disney has way too many undercover cops. Like, they're everywhere, which is a good thing for safety, but also kind of a bad thing because, you know, they're watching your every move. And in our number one spot, we have the battle. This story comes from a Disney employee that worked at a store at the Disney park near the Indiana Jones ride. One time, 30 kids ran into the store and each grabbed a toy sword from the bin, you know, so that they could be just like Indiana Jones. But then the kids started attacking the two workers in the store with their swords. And obviously the workers aren't allowed to like yell at the kids or panic or fight back, so they just let the kids attack them until their parents noticed and called them off. By then, he says his arms were already covered in cuts and bruises and he was bleeding. Yeah, maybe those weapons should be like placed behind the counter or something, you know, so things like that don't happen. Or maybe Disney should just have a better policy, I don't know.